Hi, I'm Mike McMahon, the showrunner and creator of Star Trek Lower Decks, and you are watching Trek Culture.
As a writer, and of course as a video essayist, as a podcaster, one of the things I love so much about your content, I mean, obviously we're going to talk about the Star Trek of it all in a moment. So it was like, kind of, this is amazing, why are we on a Star Trek podcast? We'll get to that in a second. But how you've explored this history of queer representation in pop culture has just been so eye-opening. And sir, you are responsible for me yesterday finishing my first watch through of The Golden Girls.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. How exciting. First of all, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you like the stuff. And also, how did you like the Golden Girls?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, it took me so long to actually sit down to watch it, and then straight out it was like, oh, I get it. I get it now. And how did they get away with some of the stuff they got away with in the 80s and early 90s?
It is wild. There are some, like especially with Blanche, but like some really filthy jokes. The one that honestly shocks me, and it's not from the Golden Girls. It's from the Nanny. There's an episode with a gay character. It's just like a little one-off character, and he says something about his husband or his partner, or whatever term they use at the time, and significant other. And so he says it's something like 30 years. We've been together 30 years and still no children, but we keep trying. It's such a, I don't know, visceral joke. It really gives me a little jump scare. But it's so funny how like some things will just sail right on by the standards and practices. Like they won't realize the context or the I don't know, like the subtext of something kind of dirty. And it's a real pleasure when something like that can make it through.
What initially inspired you to start doing what it is that you do? And also, where on earth do you get the energy from? I mean, your output is impressive.
Thank you. Well, let's see. I don't know. We'll go back to the very beginning. No, I honestly, something I was just talking to somebody the other day about this is that in high school, I was on a very computery track. Like I was like the town nerd, basically. I had founded the computer club. I was completely all in on Star Trek, anything like nerdy and dorky, that was my thing. And then one of my friends started doing a public access show. I don't know if this is something that exists in other countries, but basically the way that works in the US is because it's considered like a public good, a public utility. Companies are only allowed to run wires to our houses if they let us use them to some small extent for our own things. So this is back in the 90s, in every small town or every couple of towns, there would be this public access station where anyone could go, and for free, as I recall, at least in my situation, for free, you could just say, I'd like a camera and I'd like a studio and I'd like some lights. And you could pay a little, more if you needed technicians and all that stuff. But then they just had to let you use the facilities. And so a bunch of high school students, my friends, were making some TV thing. Like it was just the dumbest high school comedy show. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. I kind of like that. And I like these movies and TV and that kind of stuff is kind of interesting to me. Completely switched gears, went to college for film and writing. Came out of that not knowing exactly what I wanted to do, but the thing that really got me going into the work that I do today is that I was working in the industry. I was working in the film industry professionally, and then off to the side, I'm doing more equality organizing and starting to go to rallies and stuff. This is around 2007, 2008. Starting to get a little bit more political because I just hadn't really had much of an awareness prior to that, or at least not as much as I should have. And I started to see how much the entertainment and the activism overlapped, and how much, entertainment is political and how much politics is entertainment, and it's all the same thing. And so after we got marriage equality somewhat locked in the US in 2015, I was thinking about where to go from there, and I was making videos mostly about the political stuff, about the activism. Started to look a little bit more at how the entertainment that we like dovetails with what's happening in the news. And it was actually a video about the Golden Girls that really hit. Like I made a video about the episode where Dorothy's friend Jean comes to visit and develops her feelings for Rose. And people responded well to that, and I responded well to that. I'm like, I like doing this. So let's kind of use what gradually developed over time is looking at entertainment and sort of using that as like the tasty candy shell around talking about more important issues. So we'll get in on like the fun stuff, whether it's Star Trek or Batman or Golden Girls or whatever. We'll start there and then, peel back the layers because it's all, this is going to sound very woo-woo, but we're all connected, and we live in a society, and part of that is learning how to be good people to each other, and one of the ways we do that is through culture and the art and entertainment that we make. So anyway, that's a very long-winded way of saying that it was wanting to tell stories and wanting to tell stories about stories.
And I think as well, one of the things that I think really draws me to a lot of your content is the way in which you present it. I mean, it's very easy to follow. Like you are very much delivering a lecture, but in a way that doesn't feel like you're delivering a lecture. Mm-hmm. And is that something? Was that something that you woke up one morning? I am capable of doing this. I have nailed this format. I can do this from the first day. Or is it something that might have developed over time?
I don't know. That's a good question. Funnily enough, one of my first experiences with that kind of thing was, or like doing it a little bit more deliberately. I was in drama club, and so I'm somewhat comfortable getting up on stage and talking, in front of people. But before I started doing these videos, I was the kind of like Majel Barrett. I was the voice of the help system inside it was an internal company. I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but like a knowledge base, basically. So basically, like the company that I was working for had all these like help documents on how to use their software. It was a visual effects software. And there was a option to have it read aloud so that, you're in the software and you could just have a voice saying in your ear, here's how to do the thing. And because I worked in the training department at this company. And so, I was the one who recorded the voice, and I just really liked doing that. And I guess that was I wasn't thinking about like turning it into more of a thing, but I really liked doing that. And then when the marriage stuff started heating up around 2008 for me, is because there's a lot of votes and activism and marches and things. At the time I was just recording some videos just to let people know what was happening San Francisco. And, it was 2008. And so I had a lot of practice since then.
But yes, you did an incredible video effectively defending Lwaxana Troi recently, which still in 2025 feels like almost a radical thing to do.
Isn't it strange? Yeah, I was not aware that anyone had any like ill will towards that character until there was another podcast that was talking about her episodes and described them as like the filler episodes. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then I, started looking into it, and there were, there have always been a lot of people who love the character, and there have always been a lot of people who have very strong feelings about her, getting in the way or being disrespectful or being too sexual or whatever. Like so many complaints, and I think a lot of it is, or some of it is people who are outraged by the sight of a outspoken woman, and that's the beginning and end of it for them. And also, I think some of the objections are legitimate. Like, I do think that especially the early TNG episodes, are a little meandering. Manhunt in particular is, just
watched it.
I don't think that we're getting from Manhunt. Okay, so like to really I feel like this is a safe space for me to get like hyper specific about Star Trek.
This is definitely a safe space for you to get hyper specific about Star Trek.
Okay, so I love that episode. I don't think it's one of the big idea episodes when you compare it to, say, Half a Life. Like they're not tackling the big concepts of life and death. However, the thing that I love about Manhunt, which is the one, for audiences who may be not familiar, it's the season 2 episode where she beams on board and she's a delegate to some convention, and the whole episode is about her basically being in heat and bouncing around the ship looking for a mate. And then in the final 30 seconds, she says, oh, these fish aliens that have literally been standing on the mantle, almost literally standing on a mantle, the entire time. One of them's, they're terrorists and they've got bombs, and anyway, I saved the day. Goodbye. What I love about it is that what every fan would expect to be the A plot of the episode is relegated to just like some funny jokes and a 30-second little resolution at the end. And it is so pedestrian and boring to Lwaxana that she tosses it off like it's some like fidget spinner that she just has on her finger while she's having another conversation. She's like, well, I saved everybody's lives. Goodbye. Like, it's so easy for her. And so it does feel a bit like, and I don't know if this was the intent, and I'm sure it's not, but it does feel a bit like the writers saying, just pulling an elaborate trick on the audience. I don't think, like, I do know that Tracy Torme, who wrote that one, asked to have his name taken off of it, credited to some other made up. I think that there was a little bit of, I don't know, probably some politics behind the scenes on how that episode turned out. But I do love that she has so much fun, essentially trolling the show.
That is because I've always got this impression, right or wrong, that there was a sense of kind of they could get away with an awful lot because she was Majel Barrett. You could be silly and you could kind of do the episode that probably wouldn't get greenlit in another show. Now, whether that's because she was the creator's wife, I'm, by the way, a big Majel Barrett fan. There is nepotism, don't get me wrong. We only need to look at the original series and a little bit the animated series as well. But I think it's nepotism used well, if that's maybe a fair thing to say.
Yeah, well, I think we really lucked out in that Majel is a fantastic actress and she's funny and emotional and it would have been one thing if, I don't know, he was putting, bless his heart, their kid, I don't think is screen ready, and nor does he want to be. If they started putting their kid in, if they cast, Eugene is his name, right?
Yes, yeah, Eugene, yeah.
So if they had cast him as Wesley Crusher, for example, because I think he would have been around the right age, I think that would have been a bad experience for literally everyone. However, obviously Majel wants to do it. She's a great actress. I wish she was in more stuff. I don't think it's entirely nepotism when someone is just like really talented and the best person for the role. It's hard for me to imagine any other actress of that time. No, actually, I take that back. Immediately, I was like, who else could play that role? And I'll tell you who, Jackée Harry.
Oh, yes. Oh my God, images of Sister just popped into my head. Yeah.
Yeah. The perspective of like all the history that I do is Star Trek is such a great document of just where we are as a culture at any particular time. It extends back like, what is it, 70 years now? Like it's about to hit 75 years.
We're coming up on 66 is the official, yeah. And then 64 because the cage. So Majel's
right
since 1964, sure.
Good gravy. Anyway, it's a show that like extends far enough back that it's sort of a time capsule where you can look at, and it's such a great reflection. Obviously it's sci-fi, it's set in the future, but really it's about right now. And so when you watch original series or animated series or, DS9 all the way up to even Enterprise, bless its heart, I think is a really good document of the Bush years, for better or for worse. And so when you watch that show and it really tells you a great story about where we are as a people. I don't think that's why people go to Star Trek. They're not going to Star Trek to be like, tell me, through the lens of science fiction, where are we what is humanity doing right now? But I think it's a relevant show. And also, look, it's fun and silly. Janeway goes onto the holodeck in the Spider Queen costume. And, it's a hoot. It's just fun. It's a little tough for me to watch Discovery, actually, because I don't think Discovery is having fun in the way that Strange New Worlds, for example, is. But also like that ethos, the Trek ethos. Here's really what it is for me is, not to be too messianic about it, but Gene's vision, whether that was really the vision from the beginning or whether it was maybe a little retconned to, ennoble the project, whatever. But this idea of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, the human experiment and, all this stuff of how are we going to survive to the 24th century? Well, we're going to do it by learning not just to tolerate each other, but learning to be excited about our differences.
One of the things as well that I really like is because I was just saying before we started recording, your Patreon video just gone there about the animated series. So I've just completed, for the first time in a long time, an episode 1 to final episode watch through of the animated series. Watched it when I was younger, then I've watched bits and pieces as I've gone along. One of the phrases that jumped out at me was "sexy Satan," so that one I was properly snorted into my coffee. So thank you for that one.
Yeah. He's rendered in so much more detail than he needed to be. It's so funny. Like he's so muscular and like every shot is like his rippling back muscles and like wow,
Right?
okay, Satan looks great.
It's you know, on the one hand, yes, it's supposed to be this attractive character. That's the whole point. The thing it was like, yeah, but as you made the point in your video about like, you know, Filmation, God bless their hearts. They were working to a budget. You know,
Yes.
they and you know, there was a variety that maybe wasn't there. But no one rang in sick on that episode.
That is true. It is so funny. Like there are moments where if you just look at like one still shot, you know, like a frame from any episode of the animated series, it's tough to know if it looks funny or looks weird because they're on some crazy planet and you know like something strange is happening on this weird planet, or if it's just an animation error. Like the episode, I think it's the Infinite Vulcan where like is that the one where you've got the giant Spock?
That's the giant Spock for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, I was scrubbing through the animated series, and I landed on a frame of that, and I was like, I genuinely can't tell if this is supposed to be a giant Spock or if they just drew it wrong. They just didn't have time to fix it.
As good as TNG is, and it is good, it was safe for a long time. And you know, it did a lot of allegory, as did the original series. It did do good. And then the host, and then the outcast.
Yeah, and you know, I think some of that is attributable to the squeamishness of the people behind the scenes and the function of the show. Like the purpose of the show was to go to first run syndication, and I understand the concern. Like some markets aren't going to air it, so what's the point of making a show that is not going to air in some networks, in some stations? On the other hand, like, you know, the other purpose of the show, like creatively, is to push boundaries and, you know, bring Gene's vision to life. And that's the reason the show is the success that it is. So, I agree that it's a little disappointing. It's a little cowardly that they didn't go there. I do think it's good, you know, that Next Generation was as, it was great. It was great. And even the bad episodes are good. I enjoy, even, you know, Data's having a funny dream about Sigmund Freud. Okay, look, it's not their best work, but there's things to recommend about it. The bless their heart, Up the Long Ladder. When they go to Planet Ireland, I think that I'm sure you have strong feelings about that one, and it is a sight to behold. Even those, I think are there's something of value to be found in them. But I think the show could have been even more. I think that, you know, but yeah, what can you do? You're not going to change it now, so all we can do is demand better from Star Treks to come.
Do you know what's very, because Up the Long Ladder, right? And no, I'm not going to go into a rant on Up the Long Ladder. I could, no, but it's funny because we had the writer of that episode, Melissa Snodgrass, was actually on with us there a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, wonderful.
And we were chatting away, and because the episode is quite funny because what does everyone remember now? They remember the Irish Tinkers, and they remember Patrick Stewart couldn't hold it together and just breaks his heart laughing in one scene and everything. And they forget about the entire pro-choice storyline that runs alongside it. And you're like,
oh my God, yeah.
Wait, what just happened?
Yeah, no, and I do genuinely think, like, one of the greatest lines of all Star Trek is haven't you ever seen a woman before? I thought I had. Oh my God, what a heartthrob. But you're right, like that episode, it's a bit of a callback to original series, What Are Little Girls Made Of? Yes. Where, you know, we're thinking about the sanctity of human life and like how, like what constitutes life and to what extent do people have authority over their genes? Like this is a question that we're still tackling with, you know, companies like 23andMe, for example, that is taking people's DNA and like doing stuff with it. Now they're not creating clones yet, but you know, like taking people's genetic material and suddenly your genes are floating out there. I mean, you know, and this is an issue that humanity is kind of like not had a great track record on. When you look at, for example, the story of the HeLa cells. It was this woman whose name I've forgotten, but these researchers, this was decades ago. There's something very interesting and unique about her DNA that was important for scientific study, and without her consent, they took her, like, you know, her genetic material and were researching it, were using it to like grow stem cells or something like that, and her family didn't really understand what was happening. And like, this is a real thing that was happening for decades in the scientific community, and it's incredibly unethical. And yes, like Up the Long Ladder is silly, but there's this incredible story about, what it is to have control over your body. And also, the great Gene Roddenberry stuff of, these two very different cultures needing each other. And so, yes, it is a great episode.
It is funny. I know when a couple of years when I started this job, I did not think that at one point I would be sitting down defending Up the Long Ladder, and yet, but also I'm also the kind of person that I will defend Sub Rosa to the ground. Granny's erotic journals, perfect. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. No, I love it. It's such an interesting take on like a pulpy romance novel. Like, it's not, again, like, I love when Star Trek takes risks. I love when anything takes risks. A big swing. Try something different. Try something new. See what happens. And, as bananas as that is, I do love, there's that scene where she says, I did fall asleep reading a particularly erotic passage in my grandmother's journal. And the cutaway, like the reverse shot of Marina Sirtis, like, gives her this look that I don't know if it's her character, I don't know if it's the actress, but it is the look that you get when, if somebody, to mangle a line from Seinfeld, when George has some line where he's like, I recognize that look. It's the same look my father gave me when I said I wanted to be a ventriloquist. And that is the look she's giving the Doctor at that line. I love, oh my God, the later season when Troi can put on the uniform and do a little bit more character and be an actual professional therapist. I love when we get more Troi stuff.
Thank you so much for watching this abbreviated version of this podcast. Now, if you go to our audio platforms, you will get the full version of this podcast with this guest. So we really, really appreciate you subscribing to that, and you're just awesome and wonderful. Thank you so much.